You're probably here because you want to know what is Mars in astrology, and more importantly, you are wondering, how do I even begin to understand not just the textbook definition of what my Mars placement is, but how to understand it somatically and in my life, but also how can I consciously work with Mars without having this massive struggle, because I think a lot of us can easily understand the textbook definition of Mars, or at least part of it. We know it governs our drive, our instinct. It's how we exert effort, will, passion, or energy. And now this video will not only dive even deeper into what Mars actually means, but it will hopefully help you learn how you are motivated and how to consciously motivate yourself. And it can also help you understand how to properly exert your drive and your passion, and how to identify the factors in your life that can motivate you in ways that lead to actual results, no matter what the path to getting there looks like. But before we get into what all Mars placements mean by sign and house, let's go over a metaphor that could truly help you understand what Mars actually means in your life. Think of the circuitry of Mars like a complex outlet, more than just a standard wall one. Think of it like a 5D outlet that can receive and expend energy in more colorful and complex ways. But before we look at the sign and house, there is a very important distinction we need to make, something that isn't always noted by astrologers, because Mars acts like a circuit, and in a circuit, energy is given and received. And your Mars placement doesn't just dictate the energy you exert in the world, it dictates the energy the world exerts onto you. And so first, we will look at what the sign of Mars can tell you. And think of this as the voltage, or the style, or the functional characteristic, or the specific adapter on the outlet. The sign tells us how you exert your drive, yes, but it also tells us how you may experience or derive motivation and the specific characteristics of how you receive energy from outside forces. And then we look at the house Mars is placed in. Think of this as the room where the outlet is located. The house tells us where the outlet is, yes, but it also specifically tells us where you can derive your energy and what could motivate it. And it can also tell us, in some cases, but not always, where this energy is applied. And in theory, whatever energy is being circulated, this energy can be spent in numerous ways. It can cook you dinner, it can help get your work done, it could help you complete that art project or pursue that romantic connection. But the specific circuit through which that energy is given and received, that is what the birth chart indicates. And so just for one example, just because you have Mars in the 4th house, for example, doesn't just mean that you spend your energy on your home like a lot of basic astrology guys will say. I have this placement, I would know. It could mean that you are driven by security, but also you could find motivation and inspiration from your home, your roots, or your family, and you could be motivated by your past or motivated towards a safe and secure future. But this motivation could blend into your career, your relationships, your learning experiences, you name it. But we have to look at one more factor, which is the speed at which energy travels. Because whether your Mars is direct or retrograde can show how the themes of drive show up for you. Think of Mars direct like a live wire connected to a light switch. The moment the world flips your switch, the energy flows straight through you and the light turns on instantly. Mars retrograde, however, works more like a rechargeable battery, and instead of reacting right away, you have to absorb the energy and let it charge up inside you before you can easily release it back out effectively. One is not superior to the other, and it also doesn't mean that a direct Mars still doesn't need that extra push to channel their motivation in the right direction. The mastery lies simply in knowing whether your instinct requires an open channel to release instantly or a container to build pressure before the drive can effectively be channeled. Now, obviously, there is a lot more factors that go into one's Mars placement, but I wanted to keep this video simple just to kind of, give you some inspiration to learn how to channel your energy, how to motivate yourself. And if you are curious, because I know a lot of you are curious, how do aspecting planets, affect my Mars? I do have a guide for that down in the description in case you are curious. And so we all operate differently, and you are probably insanely curious to understand how you can best channel your Mars placement to its fullest potential. And so please go down to the description, look at your timestamps, and let's help you develop an understanding of the potential Mars has in your life in 3, 2, 1, go. Mars in Aries, I would think of your Mars as the celestial equivalent of flint striking steel, and you tend to operate on the principle of spontaneous combustion, and your energy isn't usually a steady hum. It can be a series of explosive bursts, and you likely derive energy from the new. So the moment an idea hits, your body might get flooded with adrenaline, really creating a biological imperative to move right now. And you generally expend energy through direct linear action, seeing point A and smashing through walls to get to point B. And you aren't usually motivated by long-term rewards, but by the thrill of autonomy and the question of, can I do this? Although you could be very, long-term reward geared, if that makes sense, but it's usually, the action itself that fuels you. And so in practice, you could be the type who decides at 2 a.m. to rearrange your living room and actually finish by 4 a.m. only to collapse later. And it often feels like a physical itch in the muscles that can only be scratched by doing. And it's the racehorse in the gate. There could be a trembling, kind of vibrating quality to your energy. And you could be the type who physically taps your foot in meetings because the talking phase is over and the doing phase needs to start. Or maybe you don't care about the logistics, you care about what it takes to get there. And if you want to move, but you're kind of forced to wait or to slog through bureaucracy, the sensation can be agonizing. It kind of feels like a shaken soda bottle, if that makes sense. The pressure builds behind your eyes. You could feel very physically repressed, as if your limbs are being held down. And if you want to move but you can't for some reason, it could manifest as tension headaches or even like skin tight irritability. And if you move towards something unexciting as well, which is also a risk, the engine can simply cut out, and you can't really fake momentum without the spark because the ignition in your life will go dead. And society could almost gaslight the way you expend energy, really valuing consistency over intensity. And maybe during different parts of your life, you could have heard phrases such as you're impulsive or you never follow through, making you feel like a failure for working in sprints rather than marathons. And you're kind of told to have a 5-year plan when your energy is often designed for, 5-minute little managed projects. And when you try to conform to the slow and steady model, you could lose your greatest assets, your speed and your courage. And so to recharge, you often do have to burn it physically, but you have to also rest after that exhaustion, and you have to kind of expel that energy if you want to really, recharge that battery. But also, you need to be the type, if you do have a goal, a long-term goal, you have to gamify your life by turning tasks into beat the clock challenges. Use this energy by working in micro sprints. Don't look at the whole mountain, just sprint to the next ledge, then stop and then sprint again, because that is how you can get from point A to point B, and that is how you can best spend your energy. Mars in Taurus tends to operate like a massive diesel engine or a steamroller. It might take time to warm up, but once you're moving, you are nearly impossible to stop. You are like the bull. And so you likely derive energy from stability, sensory feedback, and rhythm. And unlike Aries, you usually run on stamina and groundedness, which is kind of the opposite in some ways, really expending energy in a heavy, methodical way. Your motivation, though, is also usually very tangible, and you often need to see or feel the result of what you are going towards in order to be motivated by it. And you are also probably motivated by security and building something lasting. And you're not necessarily doing what you're doing for glory, but for maybe the resource, the comfort, or the peaceful garden at the end of what you're trying to do. And you might be the type of person who can engage in heavy labor for 12 hours straight, long after others have burnt out. And it can feel like a locking in sensation or a flow state where you dig your heels into the mud and push the world forward inch by inch. Although, in order to really, start this action, that's what takes a lot of energy, which is why I can sometimes feel that Mars being in detriment here is, hard. But there is some benefits because you don't, stop once you start. But you could also be the type to be the one who refuses to change their methods because maybe your current rhythm sustains you. And you could also kind of be like the tortoise who isn't necessarily racing, you're just watching and you will get there when you will get there. There's a few ways this placement can play out. And so, forcing yourself in the wrong direction or forcing yourself to try to move when you don't want to can feel like running waist deep in concrete. And if rushed or forced to multitask, your energy tends to solidify. And the pent up energy feeling can feel like a heavy, suffocating blanket of kind of inertia. And if pushed towards a flimsy or high risk goal, you could experience a deep stubbornness where you physically cannot make your body move. You don't want to make your body move. And you could also feel very energetically heavy, sluggish, or congested, which makes doing anything pretty hard. And in a culture that kind of values like hustle culture, if that makes sense, society could label the type of movement you make as maybe lazy or stubborn. And maybe you're bombarded with messages that you are behind because you aren't frantically running like everybody else. And this could create an anxiety where you could feel valid only if you're rushing, or the exact state that cuts you off from your power. And you are designed for endurance, not for speed. So trying to match a frantic pace can make you clumsy, exhausted, or resentful. And so to recharge, you usually need stillness and sensory indulgence to remind your body that it's safe. You need to add kind of like sensory, I don't know, little trinkets to your workflow. Maybe get a comfortable chair, good coffee, good food, good smelling candle, anything to really help you be productive when you do have to complete something. And you can harness your energy by respecting the ramp up process. Don't just jump out of bed and work. Give yourself a long runway to get the engine warm so that what you do go towards, you will be ready and charged in a way that can help you accomplish anything. Mars in Gemini tends to operate like a multi-threaded processor needing 10 windows open to function. You're kind of very, not very linear, if that makes sense. You may be a little bit frantic, buzzing, and electric, but it can be in a great way because you likely derive energy from curiosity, variety, and the information gap. And the moment you see a new angle, your engine can rev up. And this is such a good way to be if you can find this energy because there's so much information out there to inspire you. And you expend energy through dispersal, and you generally want to dig 50 shallow holes, not one deep one, in whatever it is that you're doing. Your motivation as well is very intellectual because you aren't typically motivated by conquest or material reward, but by the puzzle of, solving or hacking your life. And you need to figure out how, the things that you're trying to go towards, how they work, and you need to talk about it or think about it while doing it in order to get somewhere. And you are likely the type of person who is cooking while listening to a podcast and texting and organizing a drawer and, getting your doctor's appointment ready all simultaneously. And it can kind of feel like a constant low level hum of anxiety that translates into productivity only when things are scattered and you actually, have stimulation to do things. Your energy is very buzzy, so you could vibrate or have restless legs because your nervous system is probably charged with this placement. And you may be the type who gets a random burst at 10 p.m. because an interesting article requires that you research the history before sleeping. You could be the kind who goes on tangents, and that kind of fuels you as well. And so, forcing yourself into a singular monotonous track can feel like torture to your energy. And if forced to focus on one boring thing, your pent up energy feeling can manifest as mental instability or static noise kind of screaming in your head. And you don't just get bored, you can kind of even get a little bit neurotic if your energy is being pointed in the wrong direction. And the energy can also turn inward. It could become anxiety, or maybe you could snap at your environment, and you might feel trapped in a cage of silence. And there could be like panic building because the cooling fan in your brain or in your body or in your mind has not been turned off properly. And society could judge people who expend energy like you, perhaps labeling people like you as unfocused or chaotic, because it seems like they glorify the specialist who picks one lane. And so you could hear things like settle down or stop starting things you can't finish. And this creates a complex where you could feel incompetent for your cycles of short-term fascination, and you are told versatility is a lack of discipline. And when you force yourself to be the steady specialist, you kind of kill your gift. You need to cross-pollinate ideas, and you are designed to be the bee in life, not the ant. And so to recharge your energy, you often need a palate cleanser, not silence. You need to recharge by switching channels, not turning off the TV. Or read something unrelated to what you're doing, or maybe walk in a busy area and use this energy by practicing planned chaos. Maybe work on a project A for 20 minutes and then work on project B for 35 minutes. And you don't really need to like set a schedule, but kind of go back and forth when you're trying to be productive, because the act of switching can be a fuel that can really carry you far no matter where it is you're going in life. Mars in Cancer tends to operate on a tidal system. It's very cyclical. It moves with a flow of energy and it can be very mood dependent. Your energy may ebb and flow, and you likely derive energy from emotional resonance or protection. You can be a little bit of a protective person. You might not lift a finger for a task, but you could lift a car off of somebody you care about. And you often expend energy in a spiral, encircling problems rather than attacking it head on. And motivation is often dependent on safety and the why. And you need to feel your action is maybe nurturing or protecting or securing something you love or that you're passionate about before it's even worth it for you to do it. And you might seem low energy all day and then spend 6 hours cooking for a sick friend with intense focus or working on a passion project that resonates with your soul. And it can feel like a swelling of water in your chest. When motivated, it feels like an emotional imperative, a need from the gut, and you tend to move based on vibes. If the vibe is right, you are relentless. And you could renovate your life aggressively because it feels safe, but ignore the cold and detached tasks in your life completely, because why do you need to do those? And forcing action when unsafe or disconnected could feel a little bit damaging to your energy. And the pent up energy feeling could feel like internal bleeding almost, or like this churning acidic gut feeling. Not like literally, but it could feel like that. You could feel like very sick to your stomach. And if forced to be cold or aggressive, you're likely the type to retreat and the energy can evaporate. You don't explode like some people do, you tend to implode, and you can become moody and tearful if something isn't really valuing your energy, and it can feel like being dried out. Or maybe you can feel like a sea creature almost on hot pavement. And if you cannot connect emotionally to whatever it is you're doing, you could feel heavy and resentful. And society could create shame around how you expend your energy because it feels like society tends to value stoicism. Maybe you've heard phrases such as don't be so sensitive or leave your feelings at the door, or it's about the facts, not the intuition at different parts in your life. And so you could feel weak for navigating, your body through your intuition, no matter how intellectual you are. And you are told emotional fluctuation is a liability, but for you, it's your guidance system. You are designed to fight for love, not for the sake of fighting. Acting like the cold, rational soldier could cut you from your power source, which is your heart and your instincts. You probably actually have a gut feeling that is strong with this placement. And so to recharge, you usually need a womb space. You need privacy, safety, water, whatever makes you feel good and safe. You typically cannot recharge in public. Return to your shell to kind of liquefy, if that makes sense. But also, when you do have to work, you have to personify the work. Don't do it for the company. Don't do it, for the result. Do it for maybe the person it helps or the peace and safety that it gives you. And harness the energy by respecting the ebb of life. And so when the tide goes out, rest because it'll always come back in. Mars in Leo tends to operate on radiation and going all in whenever it does really commit to something. If you do commit to something with this placement, you are not half assed. And like the sun, you don't try to shine, you exist, you create heat. Your energy is very sustained, warm, and expressive, and you often derive energy from dignity or appreciation. And when respected and you feel like regal in whatever it is you do, your energy can feel like it's infinite, and you really expend energy through maybe creative expression or leadership, or at the very least, you want to put your signature on whatever it is that you're doing. And motivation is very tied to pride or the heart. You are motivated to be the best, most generous, or the protagonist in the movie of your life, no matter what it is you're trying to achieve. And you might be the type to maybe volunteer to lead a presentation or to create something grand simply because it invigorates you. And it can feel like a warm glow in the chest radiating outward. And when your energy is on, you can have a magnetic charisma. Even making coffee, you will kind of do it with flair, kind of like you're walking through life as the main character in your own story. And it feels like the spotlight is following you, even if it's just the one you kind of create in your head. And you might be exhausted by maybe anonymous busy work, but wake up instantly to pitch an idea because maybe the performance stakes kind of activates your adrenaline. Being anonymous or micromanaged or disrespected or feeling like maybe you can't hold your head high with whatever it is you're doing can feel devastating to your energy. And the pent up energy feeling you have won't necessarily come out as an explosion, although it can for some people. It will more so feel like a withering, and it might feel like a lion kind of being put in a cat carrier. You could feel very small and cold and lifeless, not in like a dead way, but like, in a you need a pep to your step type of way. And if treated as interchangeable or treated like your contribution doesn't matter, your heart rate can slow down almost to a state of being stagnant. And you tend to get dramatic in some ways rather than irritable if you do go big. And the pressure, if unexpressed, could make you feel like you are screaming underwater. And society often judges people who expend like you as maybe arrogant or high maintenance, really valuing humility to the point of erasure. You could have heard different phrases in your life, such as it's not all about you or stop showing off. And this kind of creates a complex where you could feel ashamed for your need to, act on certain things. You are told that wanting credit is a flaw. And when you try to be a faceless cog, you kind of lose your solar power. You were designed to be a captain, even if naturally it feels uncomfortable to you. And dimming your light just makes the room darker. And so to recharge, you often need play. You need genuine creative fun where you are the star. Go to karaoke or dress up for no reason, but also when you do have to act, try to romanticize the task. View your life through a cinematic lens. You aren't just walking the dog, you're the main character walking the dog. Use this energy by taking the lead and owning your domain so that no matter what it is you act towards, you are ready to go and you can achieve anything you set your mind to. Mars in Virgo really tends to operate like a laser calibrated scalpel. Your energy can be nervous, twitchy, but it's very, very focused. You are very strategic and very analytical with this placement, and you likely drive energy from order and competence, not passion or praise. You expend energy through micro adjustments, analysis, and in some cases, service. You want to fix, refine, and polish. Motivation is found in the details, and you are motivated by the itch to correct an error or to improve your life or to improve somebody else's life. And if you see a crooked frame or a typo, your energy often surges to align it. You're probably the person who screams when somebody has bad grammar on, a TikTok comment section. And you are driven by the desire to be useful and master your craft no matter what it is you're doing, even if it's something, less logical like art. And you might be the type to not relax until the counters are wiped, not just because you're a clean freak, although some people with this placement could be, but because visual clutter could actually drain your battery. And it can kind of feel like a constant mental scan looking for glitches in your life. But when you kind of get in the zone, you might be the type to disappear in the work that you're trying to do. And it can feel like a quiet hum of productivity where time vanishes. And you also might edit text 3 different times because precision is physically important to you. Although, if you do have an afflicted Mars, it could feel like it's hard to achieve, but you kind of feel this urge that you want everything in order, if that makes sense. But with your placement, no matter how it's placed, working in chaos without instructions can feel like torture, and the pent up energy could feel like wool, kind of on sunburned skin. It's like a constant prickly irritation, and it's told to just wink it. You could feel, a sense of dread with that. And energy meant to fix things kind of turns into anxiety or even psychosomatic illness in some cases. You could feel very dirty inside. It becomes a frantic static in your nervous system, making you feel snappy, critical, or even obsessively worried. And society often dismisses or labels people like you as nitpicky or anxious because it feels like they celebrate broad strokes over details. And so you could hear things throughout your life, such as you worry too much or stop being critical. And you could feel guilty for high standards. You're told to lower the bar for others. And when you try to be chill and ignore the details, you can feel fraudulent and unsafe because you're designed to be an editor or a healer. And without you, the big picture that everybody values will fall apart. And so to recharge, you often need a purge, cleaning, or organizing a small space. It isn't really work for you. It's kind of therapy that can calm your nerves, but also diagnose any problems. Don't look at any task you have to do as work or a chore, but as a broken system that needs your expertise. Let that invigorate you and utilize your energy by leaning into your niche. Be the specialist who knows the one thing better than everybody and really, focus on that precise way of moving, no matter what it is you're moving towards, so that when you do act, you are ready to tackle the world. Mars in Libra. Think of Mars in Libra not as a foot soldier, but as a general in a map room. And while it's often a misunderstanding to call this placement passive, you do operate on a different frequency than most because you likely derive energy from maybe collaboration, balance, and you derive motivation a little bit more passively. It has to filter through you, and you essentially kind of power your engine through the mirror of outside forces. And because you typically need maybe another person or an external force to bounce energy off of, you tend to expend your fuel through mediation and kind of playing mental chess, whatever it is that you're doing. And your motivation is usually externalized, maybe driven by restoring fairness or restoring balance in some way. And you are arguably the only sign that treats action as an art form rather than a blunt instrument. And in practice, you could be the type who seems to procrastinate for days only to execute a perfect plan in a single hour after talking to somebody or finding a spark that doesn't push you too hard. And this can feel like a constant weighing of the scales, really creating a buzzing mental restlessness where you simulate 10 outcomes before making a single move. And when you are truly motivated, the action feels less like labor and more like a rhythmic dance. And while you may hate working completely alone, even if you're an introvert, you could become very productive in group settings simply because the presence of others can actually activate your drive, even if this acts, simply as a muse. And even if you are introverted, like maybe you just got to watch a YouTube video of a person you really look up to push you. You don't have to go out and talk to somebody, but you definitely need that outside force to sort of bounce your energy off of. And if you are forced to act rashly without really thinking, or if you're forced to push, this sensation can actually be a little bit nauseating because the pent up energy can manifest as mental vertigo and indecision, as if you are standing on a spinning floor. And if forced into a hostile environment, your energy tends to flatline, causing you to disassociate rather than explode. You could disconnect more than, feel pent up aggression. Although all the Libra Mars people I know, they don't get mad a lot, but when you really do set them over the edge, they will black out. So that is possible. And so you could also feel a vibrating anxiety about making the wrong move. And if pushed to be a lone wolf or pushed to, act when there's not really order going on, you could feel very unsafe. And society could judge people who expend energy like you as people pleasers, or maybe they're not like abrasive enough. And it feels like society values the shoot first archetype, the go-getters in quotation marks. And so you could hear comments throughout your life such as stop asking for permission or make up your mind or you need to do more, which can make you feel weak for needing, more inspiration. But although you are told that maybe your pausing is procrastination, when you force yourself to act, when you try to push yourself, you often become clumsy and anxious. And you are instead designed to be a strategist because acting without consulting the map destroys your advantage. And so to recharge, you usually need social calibration with polite people or aesthetic silence in a beautiful or balanced space to realign your internal scales. And so for tasks, never do it alone if you don't have to, but also you can harness your energy by focusing on the user experience. And so instead of cleaning the house or finishing the work, if you have to do something alone, do so with the goal of balance or harmony in mind, as this can help you channel your energy even when you are doing it alone. And no matter what you're acting towards, you can really start to see results. Mars in Scorpio tends to operate like a nuclear submarine. I have this placement as well. You tend to move with deep, pressurized power, and you can derive energy from crisis, transformation, and the truth, which means you tend to operate on an all or nothing level, which I can relate to because I either work on astrology for 12 hours straight or I don't want to do it at all. There's no in between. And rather than skimming the surface, you drill, expending energy through obsession, laser focus, and almost this psychic surgery. Your motivation is very primal rather than logical. Even if you are logical in other ways, you are driven to possess, uncover secrets, gain control, or survive. It could be different for everybody. Consequently, if a task feels too high stakes, you are inexhaustible. But if it feels polite or shallow or like there's no deeper purpose, you can kind of like, become still or comatose and you don't want to move. And in practice, you could be the type who can research a topic for 14 hours without eating just to find one specific answer. You could hyperfixate on the bad side, but you could just be laser focused on the good side. And this often feels like a simmering heat in the belly or a quiet hum of, I will get what I want, I will figure this out. And your energy is very stealthy, creating a tunnel vision where the rest of the world falls away whenever you are focused. And you might be the person who is incredibly calm in an emergency while others panic, largely because the high stakes energy is exactly where you feel the most alive. Even if you are neurotic in other settings, this is kind of how I am. If I my pencil breaks while I'm at home, I will cry. But if someone like falls and, there's blood coming out of their leg, I will be calm. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but you know what I'm trying to say. But forcing yourself to almost like keep things light and transparent can kind of feel very, very draining, especially if it's something that you want to go deep towards, which is why I struggle so hard with making TikToks. I don't think it covers astrology deep enough, but also the pent up energy often feels like toxicity or even poisoning. And if denied privacy or you're forced to multitask on shallow things, you could feel a bubbling acidic resentment in your stomach, but instead of exploding, you fester, you get bitter, and it can feel like a capped volcano, really creating cracks in your psyche. But also, unexpressed intensity could turn inward, making you very paranoid or even sometimes self destructive as the feeling eats you alive. So, you need a channel. But society could also just judge people who expend energy like it was too intense or secretive. It seems like people value good vibes only over depth, and you might hear at different stages of your life, why are you making this so deep, or you're too obsessive, which can make you feel like a monster almost for your intensity. And you are told that privacy is suspicious and passion is dangerous, yet when you try to be the open book, you often lose your power. You are designed to be the alchemist and the spy, and diluting your poison makes it palatable, but it could also make it useless as well. And so to recharge, you usually need a void. You need privacy, darkness, and no perception by others, really allowing you to withdraw your energy to concentrate it, but also raise the stakes if you do have to act. And if a task is boring, imagine maybe the consequences of the failure, or, maybe the satisfying win of the success. And use fear or desire or the intense emotions you feel as a tool, and channel your energy by diving deep, picking one thing and destroying it by finishing completely. And even if you have to do something that you don't feel deep about, channel that deep emotion so that no matter what it is you act towards, you can really channel your energy in a way that can alchemize your life. Mars in Sagittarius often operates like a spreading wildfire. It's very expansive, enthusiastic, but also restless. And you likely drive energy from the horizon and belief, really running on inspiration so that if you do believe in a cause, your fuel, it will never end. And you expend energy through movement, debate, and exploration, seeking an adventure or something that makes you feel like grand and with purpose rather than just a task. And your motivation is also rooted in freedom and truth. You are motivated by the bigger picture and the promise that maybe some action you're taking will lead to something bigger. And maybe your actions are very exaggerated to both extremes, as well as it is ruled by Jupiter. And you're not here necessarily to maintain your energy, you're here to expand it. And in practice, you could be the type who decides to learn a new language and train for a marathon in the same week simply because you feel called to do so. You like to go to where your calling is. And this can feel like a rush of wind in the chest, really creating a buoyant energy, or maybe even your legs kind of twitch with a physical need to roam. You could pace while on the phone because your thought process is tied to locomotion. And when motivated, you feel invincible, kind of like a hero in an epic myth. However, forcing yourself to, be in a confined, repetitive box could be soul crushing to you, or maybe forcing you to act towards a cause that doesn't make you feel a higher calling can be debilitating. And the pent up energy can manifest as restlessness and escapism. It can feel like the shoes that you're wearing are 2 sizes too small. And if trapped in a routine without a why, you could actually panic a little bit. You're not necessarily the type to get angry, although it is possible depending on the sign of your Jupiter, but you could get flighty. And so, if you can feel the walls closing in, this repression can lead to clumsy energy where you drop things or make careless mistakes because your spirit has left the building. And society could judge people who expend energy like you as maybe inconsistent or unrealistic because it can seem like society values practical details over vision. And you might hear phrases throughout your life, such as maybe you have your head in the clouds, or you just need to, focus on reality a little bit more, which can make you feel silly for even having this visionary nature, for wanting to go towards something bigger, or for wanting to have a reason to act. It feels like everybody else is acting for no reason. Why would you waste your energy on that? That's weird. I don't know. And you're told that enthusiasm could be immature, yet when you force yourself to be a grounded realist, you kind of lose your spark. And you are designed to be the explorer and the philosopher. And clipping your wings can make you feel like you're kind of destroying your purpose. You're not meant to walk, you're meant to fly. So to recharge, you usually need new territory. You typically cannot recharge on the couch. And if you do, you better be watching a really, thrilling documentary or reading a really, enlightening book. You must go somewhere if you can, because novelty is your battery. But also, when you do something, you got to preach the gospel. Frame whatever you're doing as kind of a crusade or like a philosophical, journey. You're not just like meant to do something and then have it be done. You are meant to be kind of like the protagonist in your own story. And you got to view your life as like an epic adventure. But also, you can use energy by chunking. You're probably the type who works best in bursts of high intensity, and then you kind of walk afterwards. Do not try to sit still for 8 hours. Go where your sort of motivation is kind of telling you to go, if you do have free will over that, because it's when you're able to really align your energy with how it's meant to be spent that you can reach new horizons no matter what it is you're trying to act towards. Mars in Capricorn tends to operate like a hydraulic press or a glacier. It's very slow, heavy, but it is unstoppable. It is immovable. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. A lot of people agree this is actually probably better than Mars in Scorpio and Mars in Aries, although that's debatable, but you probably think it is. And you know what? In some ways, I agree with you. And your energy is likely disciplined, or you likely derive fuel from ambition or mastery and the desire for structure, whether on a small scale or a larger scale, which will definitely differ for everybody. And you generally do not like to waste fuel. Instead, you expend energy through calculated steps towards a summit. Your motivation is very cool and detached, driven by status, respect, or at least tangible proof of competence. If you do something, you won't be the type to do it for fun. You're doing it with a purpose, and you want to be the authority in your life, or maybe on a grander scale, who endures, and you're probably very resilient with this placement. In practice, you could be the type who stays late completing a task, not from pure anxiety, but because you simply want to expend your energy to the fullest of your potential. And it can feel like a cold, hard resolve or a heavy energy, kind of like you're wearing an armor, if that makes sense. And you're not the type to maybe get motivated by excitement, although you could be the type who's excitable depending on the rest of your birth chart. But being capable and feeling capable is your fuel source. And when you are in the zone, you feel like a machine. You're very efficient and powerful. And you could seem dry to others, but you can create complex systems. And if you are determined in whatever it is that you're doing, you will have the patience to lay every brick perfectly if you channel that energy properly. The only, bump with this placement with Mars and Capricorn is, sometimes it's hard to even start because remember, Mars is cardinal. It's about the start. So if nothing is really, calling to your energy, then you could just feel stuck, which could make you feel, hey, I'm a Mars and Capricorn. Why am I not accomplishing much? It's about finding an outlet. And so acting spontaneously or without a plan can be insulting to your nature, and being uncertain about the outcome or the worthiness of your efforts can actually demotivate you or drain you. And if you do have this pent up energy, it can manifest as very cold, very deep, almost like you're being encased in cement. And if working with incompetent people or chaotic systems, you could shut down, you could freeze, and you can become very unmovable, where repression feels like this exhaustion. And so society could also judge people who expend energy like you as cold or ruthless, or in some cases, even boring, because it feels like people value passion or bubbliness. And so you could hear phrases throughout your life, such as you work too hard or you need to lighten up, which can make you feel like a robot, even if that's not who you are. And you could be told a systematic way of acting, or maybe your ambition is greedy, or maybe you're a fun killer, if that makes sense. And you are designed to be a builder and a pillar. It is your persistence that will get you far. You just need to learn how to channel in the right direction. And so to recharge, you do usually need solitude, maybe somewhere high up or quiet to turn off the responsibility switch. But also visualize your throne. Keep your eyes on the long-term prize, knowing that whatever you're building towards, even if you suffer now, this will allow you to rule later. But also, you need to utilize your energy when you do go out in the world by reverse engineering. Maybe start with the goal and then work backwards, because knowing a boring task is a step to a summit could make it a little bit more bearable, but it could also help you find that spark to get you going so that no matter what it is you go after, you can achieve it. Mars in Aquarius often operates like a high voltage grid. It really possesses an energy that is revolutionary, sudden, and mental. You likely derive energy from concepts of the future and freedom. You typically move in quantum leaps rather than straight lines. You expend energy through innovation and rebellion. You kind of like think about the systems around you, and that's kind of what fuels you, if that makes sense. It's like if you're a cart on Mario Kart, you definitely are kind of aware of the track. That makes sense. And while your motivation is conceptual progress or breaking rules and making things fair and helping humanity, can really help motivate you, whether it's, through internal factors or external results. And you could drag your feet maybe when it comes to traditional tasks or traditional ways of doing things that, are kind of outdated, if that makes sense. If something's not broke, you're not the kind who needs to fix it. But if you're asked to invent a new way or to find a better way of doing something, you could work for 48 hours straight. And you are definitely driven to be free from the norm, or at least the parts of the norm that need refinement. And in practice, you could be the type who does nothing for weeks and then suddenly codes a website in a weekend. And this can feel like an electrical surge kind of in your nervous system, where energy is shocky rather than warm. And you could feel twitchy because your brain processes 5 timelines at once. And when you're kind of motivated, it will feel like you're downloading instructions from the ether, really causing you to act on flashes of insight rather than stamina. And you usually have a good instinct to know what is broken versus what currently works. And so conforming to rigid systems that don't operate correctly can be physically painful for you almost. The pent up energy can manifest as nervous tension, feelings like restless leg syndrome in the brain almost. And if micromanaged, you could experience kind of this internal recoil that is very stone hard, if that makes sense, because Aquarius is fixed. You're not the kind who just gets bored. You kind of glitch out, and you can feel trapped and rebellious if you aren't applying your energy correctly. And repression can feel like static electricity building up until you either snap or you ghost the situation to save your sanity. And society could judge people who expend energy like you as maybe weird or unreliable because it seems like they value a very traditional way of doing things over an innovative or more sporadic way. That's like how the 9 to 5 was designed, right? It's very boring and by the book, and you don't align with that. And so you could hear things throughout your life, such as you need to focus better or you're not doing things correctly, which can make you feel like an alien. And you are told that your way is wrong, yet when you force yourself to be the normal worker, you can short circuit. And you were designed to be the visionary and the inventor. Forcing you to maintain the old system will destroy you. And so to recharge, you need kind of like this void of expectation, going where nobody knows you or expects anything from you. And you may need to hack a system if you are stuck in like a 9 to 5 or something more traditional, or you have to do like a boring menial task. Try to find a faster or weirder way to do the work, even if the work is a bit more menial. But also, it can help to channel energy by working in bursts, except your energy could be a little bit inconsistent or it needs to be channeled in different ways. So, ride the lightning when it strikes and rest when it's gone, so that when you do need to act on, behalf of a task or a cause that really does call to your soul, you will go into it with lightning speed and you can achieve whatever it is you set your mind to. If you have natal Mars in Pisces really tends to operate kind of like an ocean tide or kind of like a rolling fog. It's not aggressive like people stereotype Mars to be. It's more so fluid when it's in Pisces, and you derive energy most likely from being inspired by something or the dream, operating with a sail almost rather than a gas tank. And so if the wind blows, you are unstoppable, but if it doesn't, which you kind of can't force wind, if that makes sense, you cannot force the movement, which can make you feel like you're kind of flying or like you're stuck depending on the day. And you expend energy through flow and maybe even spiritual service in some cases, no matter whether the service is for yourself or for others or for a cause, and no matter whether it is on a smaller or a larger scale. But you are likely driven by a motivation that is often a little bit more intangible, and you usually aren't motivated by money with this placement, although every chart is different. Maybe you are, but more so, you're likely motivated by the need to feel your action is connected to something higher or larger. And in practice, you might be the type who sleeps for 12 hours only to stay up all night painting or completing a task or crossing off everything on your to do list because the muse finally arrived. And it can feel like moving through water. It's slower, but perhaps when you do move, you feel like you do have a heavy impact. And your energy is the type that usually diffuses, kind of like you're in a trance when you are in action. And when motivated, you don't work, but you definitely flow. With this placement, you can lose track of time, and you might be the type who is a little bit more passive about some things in your life than others seem. And these are usually things that people view as important, but maybe you don't care about as much, or it doesn't motivate you, if that makes sense. But you are fierce about certain things that bring emotional or spiritual resonance, even if the rest of the world deems what pushes you as a little bit more insignificant. And so, forcing yourself to operate in harsh or soulless environments can be kind of devastating to your energy. And it can often feel like the world is designed to be that way. Maybe you feel like the world isn't designed for you. And the pent up energy can feel like disassociation or evaporation, as if you are kind of physically disappearing or you're kind of melting away when you're not motivated. And if forced to deal with like the cold, hard facts of life with no rhyme or reason, you could simply check out, really experiencing fatigue or brain fog. And repression feels like drowning on land. And if you can't connect to a higher purpose, you will drift away entirely. And society could often judge people who expend energy like you as maybe lazy or delusional because it seems like they value constant hustle over a more cyclical flow. It's like the 9 to 5 doesn't go with your flow. And you might hear phrases throughout your life such as wake up or be more aggressive, which can make you feel ashamed of your drifting nature. And you are told often that dreaming is a waste, yet when you force yourself to be the go getter, you can exhaust yourself immediately. And you are designed to be maybe a healer or a mystic romantic, or at least somebody who kind of goes with the tides of life, even if you're in a more left-brained sort of, way of life. And so forcing you to fight on the physical plane is definitely a misuse of your energy and your magic. And so to recharge, you usually need submersion, whether with water, music, or art, or whatever you really, can melt into. And sleep is often a valid spiritual practice for you, as stereotypical as it sounds, but it's not just for rest, it's to really recharge and diffuse the day through this sleeping state. But also, you're encouraged to wait for the wave. Do not force action when you are dry. Wait for the feeling and then ride it. And use your energy by working intuitively. And if you feel like working at midnight, do it, because your rhythm is not of this world. And if for some reason you have to work at a specific time, which relatable, ensure that you can find a spark, or a motivation, even in your 9 to 5 or whatever you're doing. And do so by really focusing on the long-term benefit and the dream that you have that this action could eventually lead you to, so that this can carry you wherever you need to go, no matter what you're going towards. With natal Mars in the first house, your outlet is plugged into self authentication, and you tend to derive energy from the act of initiation and self definition. You likely operate on the physics of agency, needing to feel that you are the cause of the effects of your life. And you operate best when you are breaking inertia, and it is yourself that fuels you, whether it's, you have a lot of fuel or whether you feel drained. And whether you are acting on your own behalf or you just operate on the instinct of just do it, or you always feel responsible for the movement of your life, your energy, or the lack thereof, it is likely felt very vividly in your body, as if the nature of the first house planets are kind of like crawling all over your skin, because that is how that can feel. And you could engage in a project in your life simply to test your own limits, kind of viewing life as a sparring partner. And it can feel like a physical restlessness when you aren't actively shaping your environment. And you could be quiet, yet feel a surge of power when you make a unilateral decision, no matter how big or small. And you often treat obstacles in your life not as problems, although it can feel like it sometimes, but as necessary friction to prove you are alive. And if you are forced to wait, to follow, or to be managed, at least with causes that don't really resonate with you, it can be psychologically withering, which could drain you. And this feeling of, being a shaken soda bottle, where you kind of like have this pent up energy, can manifest as physical inflammation or sudden reckless pivots in your life. And it can feel like being erased. And if you can't assert your will, you could turn that energy against your own body. And so when you're energetic, you're really energetic. And when you're not, you can literally feel like you're kind of withering away. And society can label the way you take action as either impulsive or selfish, or like you are being too much, even when you are being humble, because it could feel like society really values consensus over individual action. And you could hear phrases throughout your life such as wait for permission, or you're being too much, which could kill your spirit. Or you could have people questioning your own actions, as such as with people who seem to not be able to really handle your energy, and it can feel like you are challenging them in a way, even if that isn't your intention. And so you could feel like people are threatened by you even when you're not trying to do anything. But you could also feel guilty for your need to go first at any time, because this is something that may have been repressed at different parts of your life, and you may have been told to slow down at different parts of your life as well. And when you suppress your instinct to lead or to take action or to follow your instinct, you could become either accident prone or clumsy or drained, or you could simply feel like your energy is being taken from you, especially if you deny yourself of it. And so to recharge, you often need a solo mission, whether it's a run, a solo trip, or a personal project. But also it can help to authorize yourself and remind yourself that you don't need a license to exist, and the act of starting is your fuel. And so in whatever way you can do that, you are being urged to do that in order to best, assert your energy and to recharge your battery. With Mars in the second house, your outlet is plugged into substantiation and worth, and you tend to derive energy from the act of making things real, tangible, and secure, or you tend to feel more fuel in your body. The more confident and sure of yourself you are, there is a correlation there. And you likely operate on the physics of stability, really energized by the effort it takes to build a foundation that cannot be moved. But also, you can operate best when you see a direct physical result from your energy expenditure, meaning you like to see the results of, your efforts being worth it, and that almost fuels you. And you might not be motivated by greed, but by the deep and almost instinctual need to sustain your own existence without relying on others and to be in charge of your own material reality or your own intangible value. And it can feel like a defensive drive to ensure that your cupboards, whether literal or metaphorical, are never bare, and you could resist help when it is offered, not out of pride necessarily, but because relying on others could feel like an energy leak. And you often view your energy as a finite resource to be invested, not spent, which you are absolutely correct on. So remind yourself of that if you ever feel drained. And if your resources are threatened or your values are compromised, it can be agonizing. And so this feeling of, pent up energy could manifest as extreme territoriality. Is that a word? I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to say it's a word. But it could also be a total refusal to move. And it can feel like the ground is really dissolving. And if you feel undervalued, no matter in what setting, whether by yourself or other people or the world, you could just simply stop functioning like a machine pulling its own plug. And society could label the type of energy you have as materialistic, or in some cases, maybe you operate very slowly or methodically. And, it feels like society values speed over substance. And so that could make you kind of feel like your efforts aren't worth it at all times. And you could hear things such as hurry up, or, oh, why does this matter? This thing doesn't even matter, because maybe you value things that other people don't. And this will depend on which manifestation of this placement you have. And you could feel ashamed of your need for security, and you are told to be fluid. So when you rush your process, you could make costly mistakes that drain you further. And so to recharge, you usually need inventory. So reviewing what you own, what you know, and the assets you have, both tangibly and intangibly, but also what you value. But you also need an anchor. So focus on a physical task with tangible results. Really building something that lasts is your power source. And when you can tap into that, your energy can be limitless. With Mars in the third house, your outlet is plugged into stimulation and exchange, and you tend to derive energy from the flow of information or the friction of ideas. Or you are somebody who is often fueled by the state of your immediate environment. So it's like when you're surrounded by things that you enjoy or things that stimulate you, this will determine how your energy levels are. And you likely operate on the physics of velocity, really needing your mind or your environment to move at the speed of your nervous system, whether it's slow or fast, which could depend on the sign. And you likely operate best when you are bridging gaps, solving puzzles, or transmitting data, even if it's just through your own head. And you might not be chatty, although sometimes that can be the case. And your words or your ideas will instead invigorate you, whether you are, communicating them out loud or not. But you are definitely intellectually kinetic, and at the very least, your motivation comes from a new idea meeting an old one. And it can feel like a buzzing need to categorize and communicate the world around you. But you also could act by, a literal manifestation of devouring books or data, really energized by the hunt for a missing fact or solving the puzzle. And you could feel the most alive when you are in transit, metaphorically or literally moving between points. And so being bored, censored, or trapped in a slow environment can be torture for you and can actually drain you of your energy in a lot of ways. And so the pent up energy feeling could manifest as anxiety, nervous tics, or even like cosmic sarcasm, if that makes sense, or even just system overload. And it can feel like your brain is eating itself. And if you have no input to process, you could create verbal conflict just to generate some kind of data to work with. And this could be a subconscious thing as well. And society could label the type of energy you have as maybe scattered or argumentative, really valuing focus over breadth. And so you could feel like maybe your energy isn't always valued. And you could have heard at different points in your life phrases such as you overthink everything or calm down, but you could also just feel like a nuisance from your curiosity at different points in your life. And you could also be told to be quiet, or you could have been silenced at some parts of your life, whether it was from direct confrontation, or maybe you just feel like, different factors or people in your life have wanted to suppress your voice. And it is when you do suppress your voice that you could experience mental burnout or fatigue, and you don't really feel motivated. And so to recharge, you often need ventilation, which is writing, speaking, or a brisk walk to really help you process that energy and to get that circulation moving again. But also, you need a input or output cycle. So you must consume information and immediately use it. It doesn't need to be in anything big, but you can use it in any way possible. Just keep the data moving because this really prevents your system from overheating so that when you do need your energy, you can easily tap into it. With Mars in the fourth house, your outlet is plugged into emotional security and foundations, and you tend to derive energy from protecting what is yours, whether it's your privacy, your history, or your peace. And this can be in a literal home sense or from more of a safety sense, despite popular belief. And you likely operate on the physics of fortification, really energized by the act of drawing a boundary around your inner safe place so that your nervous system actually can calm down. And you operate best when you feel like you are fighting for the safety of your home base, whatever that looks like for you. And you might be gentle until either your home, your family, or even just your security or your core is threatened, at which point you kind of become a gladiator. And it can feel like a deep ancestral drive to survive and preserve against the world. And so you could work at a very maybe high stress job solely to buy like a property that allows you to decompress. Everything you do, even if it's in the outside world, is to, help you feel safe. But also, you could just use your past struggles not as baggage, but as the motivation or the rocket fuel to really propel your ambition or how you approach life. And so, if you feel unsafe or invaded, or unmoored, it can feel very devastating to your nervous system. And so the pent up energy could manifest as a simmering resentment. You could have stomach issues when you're stressed, or you could be passive aggressive, and it can feel like kind of standing naked in a storm. And if you cannot control your private environment, you could withdraw completely or lash out to reestablish distance. And society can label the type of energy you have as maybe defensive or emotional at different parts of your life, really valuing openness over boundaries. You may have been, people might have been hard on you for your boundaries, or it could feel like others could maybe value the just do it energy. Because it is very externally focused rather than the roots of where that comes from. So you could feel a little bit odd for that. And you could hear phrases in your life such as let your guard down or don't take it personally. And you could also feel weak for needing safety to function because you were told to always be accessible. And when you deny your needs for a fortress or for safety, you can feel powerless and drained. And so to recharge, you usually need a safe haven, which is a safe private space where you control the locks. But also, as a fourth house Mars myself, yes, I'm a fourth house Mars, reframing what you already have for the strengths it offers can also be incredibly encouraging. But also remember to define the perimeter of your life and remember that your public actions are just the moat really protecting your castle. So frame any action you take as such, because securing your base will really recharge your battery so that when you do go out in the world, you are ready to conquer it. With Mars in the fifth house, your outlet is plugged into creative actualization, and you tend to derive energy from the act of externalizing your internal world. And this could mean a million different things, so keep an open mind with this. And you likely operate on the physics of radiance, really needing to leave a unique personal imprint on whatever you touch, as it is important to remember that above all else, the fifth house is the house of creation. And you likely operate best when you are either taking a risk, maybe performing in some cases, although not all the time because every Mars sign is different, or even just engaging in something that feels like play or that brings you a sense of joy. And you could feel very serious in demeanor, although not always. That'll obviously depend on the rest of your chart, but your motivation definitely comes from the desire to feel alive, regardless of who you are. And it can feel like a burning need to be the protagonist of your own efforts, and you could take risks that seem unnecessary to others because the risk is almost this instinctual thing that invigorates you. But you often find that your energy collapses if you cannot put your own signature on the work that you do. And so being ignored or anonymous or forced into a role you don't like or a routine that zaps your joy can be soul crushing if you have this placement. And the pent up energy feeling could manifest as dramatic acting out or a total collapse in confidence. It can go both ways. And it kind of can feel like the lights are going out in your soul. And if you cannot express your uniqueness or your joy, or if your creation is suppressed, you could feel, very demanding, or there could be challenges with your inner child as you feel like your life force is being zapped from you in some way. And society can label the type of energy you have as maybe dramatic or ego driven because it really feels like it can value conformity over expression. And you could hear at different parts of your life stop showing off or be humble, or you might not be treated seriously, even in settings where you deserve it. But you could also feel ashamed of your need for recognition or your desire to live a joyful life because you were told to blend in. And when you dim your light, you often feel maybe a little bit depressed or even lethargic. And so to recharge, you often need a stage, which is any arena where your individual contribution matters, no matter what that definition is for you. But also, it helps to embrace a signature style. Do any task, but do it your own way, because putting your name on the work is what will generate the power so that no matter what it is that you do, you are ready to take on life. If you have Mars in the sixth house, your outlet is plugged into competence and calibration, and you tend to derive energy from the act of fixing, refining, or optimizing systems, whether in your life or in the greater world, no matter what that day to day living looks like for you. And you could operate on the physics of being systematic, energized by the removal of friction and error in your environment or your body. And you can operate best when you are solving a tangible problem that has a correct solution, or when the state of your day to day life is aligned with you and your body and your soul. And you might not seek glory or anything big or grand with this placement, although you could, because it'll depend on your chart. But you definitely seek the deep satisfaction of things working as they should. And it can feel like a compulsion to bring order to chaos, whether it's in a spreadsheet or in a physical space. And this is almost due to the nervous system soothing that this action could bring to you. And you could tackle your daily routine with almost this military like intensity, really viewing your habits as the machinery of success. And you often find your flow state in the details that others overlook. And so, working in a hopelessly broken or inefficient system, or a system that just sucks you dry no matter how that looks, can be maddening to you. And this pent up energy sort of feeling can manifest as psychosomatic illness, anxiety, or a feeling of being unsafe, or even hypercriticism. And it can feel like gears grinding without oil. And if you cannot fix the glitch, you could turn that critical laser on yourself, really tearing apart your own performance, or at the very least, feeling the weight of the world falling back onto you. And it can feel like others or society maybe wants to use or exploit your skill, but it may label you as maybe uptight or boring. Or maybe you feel like others or society is hypercritical of you because maybe others seem to value big pictures over the details, even when the little things actually matter. And you might hear phrases in your life such as, it's good enough, or relax, or calm down. And you could feel unappreciated for the invisible maintenance you do because you were told to let things slide. And when you ignore the part of your life that isn't aligned, you could feel unsafe and chaotic. So watch out for that as well. And so to recharge your energy, you usually need sort of this tune up, maybe fixing small problems or engaging in a detox. But also, you have to remember that process is power. So reframe any task you do as a ritual of alignment, because bringing order to chaos is your primary power source, so that when you are recharged, you can go out into the world ready and as fueled as you could ever be. With Mars in the seventh house, your outlet is plugged into dynamic tension. So you tend to derive energy from the presence of another, whether it's a partner, a rival, a muse, an audience. You need an outside force to kind of motivate you. This doesn't mean you can't self motivate, it could simply mean that you just need inspiration. And you likely operate on the physics of counterforce, kind of needing a wall to push against to locate your own position and your strength. It's kind of like a gauge, if that makes sense. And so you operate best when you are engaged in a dance of reaction, learning, negotiation, or advocacy. And you are designed to either act on behalf of others or to, at the very least, be inspired by them. And you might feel passive maybe when you're alone, or at the very least directionless, since you may not know naturally where to direct your energy, which is totally okay. But you can find that your will activates instantly when someone challenges you or needs you, or when you can plug into a proper outside muse. And it can feel like your energy only turns over when the circuit is completed by a force outside of yourself. And you could also be a fierce advocate, really accessing a bravery for others that you could not access for yourself. Maybe you would be a martyr for others, but maybe you wouldn't do the same for yourself. And you can also find clarity or drive only in the midst of friction or debate. Maybe you're only motivated when you have that extra push. And so being isolated or surrounded by passive people who don't push back, or being surrounded by people who simply do not have your best interests at heart, can be draining. And so the pent up energy feeling you have could often manifest as feeling isolated or attacked. And in some cases, it can make you push towards others in order to get results. And if you deny your need for a catalyst, or if you don't take responsibility for where you find that catalyst, because hey, free will is a thing, you could project your aggression, really feeling like the world is attacking you when it is simply reflecting you. And society can label your type of energy as maybe codependent or argumentative, depending on how this placement manifests for you. And it could feel like maybe self sufficiency is like heavily valued when that isn't something that always gets the job done. And you could hear phrases in your life like, why can't you do it alone? Or stop debating, or oh, you just need to try harder if you want to move. And you could feel weak when you feel like you cannot easily tap into your own energy because you were told that being hyper independent and always moving is the way to be. And when you avoid engagement, you could lose your sense of direction. And so to recharge, you do need engagement, whether it's debate or, a team sport, collaboration, even just watching your favorite YouTuber to help sort of inspire you can really get your energy sort of moving again. But also you do need an external trigger, except that you may be a little bit more reactive than the average person. Unless your Mars is in Aries, then, it's kind of like a balance for you. So find high quality people to react to, and your energy will be endless no matter what it is that you're pursuing. With Mars in the 8th house, your outlet is plugged into intensity and exchange, and you tend to derive energy from the act of breaking through surface level appearances to reach the raw, maybe messy, underlying truth of whatever it is that you're going after in life. And you operate on the physics of pressure, really energized by high stakes psychological depth and the total transformation of energy. You like to, transmutate energy, and that is kind of how you can fuel yourself. And you operate best in crisis modes or deep entanglements where the polite rules of engagement no longer apply and you can really just channel your raw energy without shame. Or you operate best when fueled by the deepest undercurrents of life in some way, whether it's a motivation or just an extra nudge. And you might be unmotivated by small talk or casual interactions, but you come alive when investigating a mystery, a taboo, or a power dynamic. And it can feel like a predatory hunger to merge or to lose the boundary of the self in order to find something more potent. And you likely possess nerves of steel in emergencies, while others could panic, and your battery actually charges when the safety net is gone. So you have to challenge yourself with this placement, and you have to treat your energy as a nuclear reserve. It's hidden, massive, and strictly reserved for critical use. And so forcing yourself to live in a transparent, normal, or polite life can kind of feel toxic to your system. And the pent up energy feeling here can manifest as simmering paranoia, self sabotage, or sudden explosive desire to burn down your current reality just to see what survives the fire. And it can feel like holding your breath underwater for years. And if you don't have a deep transformative outlet, you could unconsciously manufacture crises or tests in your life, whether literal or psychological, just to generate the friction you need to feel alive. And if you can't find that friction, you could just feel very easily drained. And society can label your type of energy as intense or dark or secretive, really valuing ease and transparency over depth. And at different parts of your life, you could have heard phrases such as, "Why so serious?" or "Just let it go," which feels like an insult to your depth perception. And you were told to just be casual, but casual feels like a lie, and you know it. You like to cut through it. And when you deny your depth, you kind of lose your internal power and become a reservoir of resentment that doesn't know how to channel itself. And so to recharge, you really need a deep dive. You need to do intensive research, deep tissue release, or psychological excavation, but also work towards controlled demolition wherever possible. Identify something dead in your life, whether a habit, a connection, or a belief, and consciously cut it, because the act of purging can release the trapped energy you need to move forward, no matter what it is that you're moving forward with in your life. With Mars in the ninth house, your outlet is plugged into meaning and trajectory, and you tend to derive energy from the expansion of your worldview and the unrelenting pursuit of the truth. And you operate on the physics of velocity, needing to feel that every action is a projectile moving you towards a larger moral or philosophical destination. And you likely operate best when you are learning, exploring, or acting as a crusader for a belief system that carries weight. And so not only are these larger horizons what you may act towards, but they may be what fuels your body as well. And so you could struggle with mundane, repetitive tasks that lack a why, but you become an unstoppable force when you feel a sense of purpose, or when you act towards something that has a purpose. And it can feel like a physical claustrophobia where your environment is stagnant and you don't just take risks. You follow gut level sort of movements that really energize you, because the unknown sometimes can be more invigorating than the known, and you view life as a quest where the movement itself generates the power to continue. And so being trapped in a small-minded environment or cynical routine could be suffocating to you. The pent-up energy feeling could manifest as extreme restlessness, self-righteousness, or reckless escapism, and it can feel like wearing a straitjacket while trying to run a marathon. And if you have no North Star to aim for, you could become dogmatic or argumentative, fighting over opinions simply to feel a sense of directional momentum. Or you could feel a complete lack of hope and faith, and that alone is enough to suck anyone dry of their energy. And society could view the way you exert yourself as maybe impractical or preachy or unrealistic, valuing the here and now over the what if, which is silly because the what if is what moves things forward. And you might have heard the phrase "be realistic" at different points in your life, which could feel like a death sentence for your spirit. And you're usually told to settle down as well, but when you clip your wings to walk on the ground, you could become clumsy, cynical, or spiritually drained. And so to recharge, you really need to find the horizon, maybe a change of scenery, a new field of study, or a physical journey that really invigorates you again. But it's also helpful to contextualize the mundane and reframe any boring tasks as necessary logistics for a grander mission. And if the destination is noble, the journey, no matter how tedious, can become a fuel that can carry you at any stage of your life and can help you move on to horizons that are way further beyond what you could have ever imagined. With Mars in the 10th house, your outlet is plugged into mastery and authority, and you tend to derive energy from the tangible proof of your competence or the legacy that you are actively carving into the world, no matter how small or how big this has to be. It doesn't necessarily mean you are career hungry. It just means that you like to work towards results, and you operate on the physics of elevation, really motivated by the desire to structure your reality and stand at the summit of your potential. And you operate best when there's a clear hierarchy to climb, or at the very least, a measurable goal that allows you to demonstrate your raw capacity, no matter what the nature of that goal looks like. And Mars in the 10th doesn't just act towards success, but it derives energy from the quest to get there as well. And with this placement, you can endure incredible strain, not necessarily for money or for status or for the job, but for the respect and the sense of safety that comes from being the one in charge of your own life, or for the invigoration that a public facing mission can give you. It'll depend on who you are. And this placement could feel like a cold or heavy drive to be the architect of your own life, even if you have it in a more emotional sign like Cancer, because you naturally take command in chaos. You're fueled by the very responsibility that could crush others in this world, and you naturally find your identity in what you can build, sustain, and protect through your own effort. Failing publicly or feeling stuck in a role that is beneath your competence can feel physically draining for you, and the pent up energy feeling sort of effect can manifest as maybe you become more ruthless, whether to yourself or others. Maybe you're very controlling, or there just could be a lot of burnout you experience, and it can feel like the gravity of the world is increasing, really weighing you down. Because if you cannot climb, you could become a tyrant in your own personal life, really obsessing over small details to mask the lack of progress maybe you're making more externally. And society could respect your output or your drive in some ways, but maybe in other ways they could label you as cold, workaholic, overly ambitious. But if you don't resonate with this, maybe they could just never view you in a way that's more personalized or more intimate. Maybe they just view you as kind of like separate from themselves. And you could hear phrases throughout your life such as you work too hard, or it's kind of hard to connect with you, or you may hear maybe you're too inaccessible, even if you aren't acting on behalf of climbing a ladder. And you could feel guilty for prioritizing your goals over emotional ease. And when you stop striving for mastery, you don't feel relaxed. You could end up feeling like a failure, which could drain you. And so to recharge your energy, you need the win. You need to set a concrete, difficult goal and try to achieve it. You can start small if you have to, just so you can have those wins to really refuel you. But it also helps you to visualize the monument, spend time on a long-term strategy, remind yourself that today's struggle is simply the foundation for permanent safety, permanent legacy, or permanent goals, if that makes sense. And seeing the big build of what you're trying to build, trying to visualize it, makes the current weight bearable, so that no matter how you try to, direct your energy in life, you can direct it in a way that can really carry you so far. With Mars in the 11th house, your outlet is plugged into future possibility and synergy, and you tend to derive energy from the concept of what could be. You're really motivated by progress and the architecture of tomorrow, no matter how that looks. And you operate on the physics of the grid. You're really energized by connecting disparate parts or people or ideas or movements to form a stronger whole. And you operate best when you are fighting for a vision that benefits the collective, or even maybe yourself in some cases, or when you get inspiration from the collective, even from a more personal standpoint. And you can act as a lightning rod for a radical change, whether it's internal or external. And you could feel lethargic about personal upkeep, yet remain tireless when maybe organizing a group or designing a new system. Or you could feel, very tireless when you're being motivated by a bigger cause. And this motivation could come at a more internal time while you're trying to go to sleep at night and you're visualizing your future. Or it could be more external when you are the center of attention or you're right in the action. And it can feel like an electric charge when you see how a specific action can shift the future, or when you see like that spark of inspiration. And you often view your energy as a hacking tool. You're not just working or just doing something, you are looking for the most efficient lever to move the status quo, to ensure that you can leverage the state of the world towards the benefit of your own energy. This is how you should operate. And you usually thrive on the frequency of innovation or change. And so being isolated or forced to maintain outdated, illogical traditions could be disorienting for you. And the pent-up energy feeling can manifest as maybe aimless rebellion or shock value behavior, really disrupting the peace just to feel a spark of life. Or maybe maybe you don't experience this. Maybe you just feel like you were isolated from society as what you were plugged into. Maybe it currently drains you, or maybe it can make you feel unplugged from the mainframe whenever you are feeling drained. Maybe you don't feel connected to a larger cause. And if you have no vision to serve, you could become a cynic who tears down existing structures without offering a blueprint for what's to come next. And society could label the way you move through life as either radical, unpredictable, or unrealistic, because they value conformity over innovation at times. And you could hear phrases such as like stop trying to reinvent the wheel or just fit in, or even you're weird at different stages of your life. And you could feel alienated for the way that you operate, being fueled by systems rather than really deriving that from maybe a singular point. And when you stop fighting for the ideal, you don't become practical. You could become a little bit detached or robotic, or you just could feel unplugged from the world altogether. And so to recharge, you really need a tribe. You need to connect with high frequency minds who share your vision to really help invigorate you. But also, it could help to focus on your distinct vision for the future, no matter what it is you're doing, even if you're just doing something at work. And you need to see the social horizon or the bigger picture to generate the power to walk towards it. And fighting for something bigger, no matter what you're acting towards, will really be a fuel source that can carry you far. With Mars in the 12th house, your outlet is plugged into the unconscious and the ethereal, and you tend to derive energy from the hidden currents of life, motivated by intuition rather than linear logic, which can be tough as it can feel like this goes against the nature of how the world works. And you operate on the physics of sublimation. You really need to dissolve your ego either into a cause, a creation, maybe a spiritual practice, or in whatever you're doing to feel powerful. And you operate best when your actions are veiled or behind the scenes, really allowing you to move without friction or public scrutiny. And you could be the type to feel drained by direct confrontation, yet possess infinite stamina for solitary work or covert operations. And it can feel like your drive is a little bit tidal. You must wait for a wave of inspiration rather than forcing a path through sheer will. And you are kind of like the secret agent of your own life, often solving problems in dreams or through subtle influence. But also, your realist battles are fought internally against invisible demons or invisible rewards. Or it can feel like maybe your battles come out of nowhere, leaving you to feeling isolated or drained. And so, forcing yourself to operate in a harsh, hyper visible hustle culture world could be exhausting, and that is not what you're meant to do. And so, this pent up energy feeling effect sort of can manifest as a deep feeling of escapism, maybe vague anxiety or desire to sleep the days away. And it can feel like trying to run through deep water. And if you deny your need for the intangible, you might feel constantly victimized by a reality that feels too sharp or loud to really carry you. And society could label your way of moving as maybe lazy or passive or spaced out. Really, it could feel like they value visible, aggressive hustle over your natural process of incubation. And you could have heard phrases throughout your life, such as wake up or why don't you fight back, which makes you kind of doubt your own potency at times because you're told to push. But when you use the world's heavy weapons, you kind of lose your footing, and your power is quiet, but it is vast. And so for you, it's not about going against your design, but learning to take that design and navigate it in the real world. And so you really need sort of a void to help you recharge. You need solitude, silence, or even just being near water. And it's when you let yourself actually unplug, which a lot of people don't do, even from vague worries, you can really pursue this recharging period in a way that is productive. But also, when you do have a goal, when you do need to act, keep it a secret until it's fully realized. Kind of like treat it like a covert operation, because containing the energy within your private inner sanctum builds the necessary pressure to act effectively in the outer world, so that when you do act, as a chance to get you where you want to go, no matter what it is you're trying to go towards.